Welcome to Media and Monuments, presented by Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Media and Monuments is conversations featuring industry pros speaking on a wide range of topics of interest to media makers.
Picture it. The days are longer and warmer, school goes on its longest break, and the focus shifts away from normal routines and toward having more fun. Summertime is arriving, and with it, the release of the biggest movies of the year. It's summer blockbuster time. In this special episode, all three of your hosts are going to chat about summer movies. I'm Candice Block, joined by Tara Jabari and Sandra Abrams, and we invite you to grab some popcorn and settle in as we learn more about the summertime genre, reminisce about our own summer movie memories, and look forward to this year's slate of big screen theater movies. Welcome!
Thank you.
Thank you, Candice, for having us on Media and Monuments.
No, we are all welcoming the guests. It's all three hosts this time, which is nice. We like to do these specials at least once a season, and this one is summer movies. So, Tara, you did some nice research about the whole summer movie blockbuster, just that is its own entity and it's a force. So, you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I looked at a couple of resources. One is Hollywood.com and a few other history of cinema blogs and things like that. And they all said it really began when air conditioning was installed in movie theaters. Movie theaters were pretty much like sweaty, sweat lodges, they said. So it wasn't that popular of a choice, especially when the weather got better. Why would anyone want to leave their houses just to get into another inside setting? So in 1925, the big leagues of the cinema, they invested over $1 million in today's money's term to put air conditioning in movie theaters across the country so that there was some kind of incentive. And then that's also kind of when they started saying we should have snacks, we should have drinks or something like water.
Make it an event. Yeah.
Like pop or soda or something like that. So that when the weather, if it's rainy or if it's too hot, you have a cool place to be. And then it was a kind of frustration of what are we going to watch kind of thing. So the term blockbuster was found in the trade magazines Variety and Motion Picture Herald for the 1943 film Bombarder by Richard Wallace. And they said the blockbuster of all action thrill service shows. So this is during World War II, and they got to learn more about the aircrafts and all sorts of stuff that helped with the war from the Allies' perspective. But according to the Guinness World Records, it wasn't until 1975 with Steven Spielberg's Jaws that it is considered the first true summer blockbuster, when it was the first film to earn $100 million at the box office. And then in 1977, George Lucas's Star Wars was the first summer blockbuster based on an original screenplay. And then it just kept going from there.
Oh, cool. So that makes a lot of sense that it all started with air conditioning as how it's a summer thing, You were talking about that one from the 40s, you said?
Yeah, 1943.
Was the term blockbuster coined because it a line wrapped around the block or something? What made it a
really.
Blockbuster?
It was just the blogs were talking about when they actually heard of this term blockbuster. I guess a bit of line things, but Jaws was the one where they would be just lining up during the summer. Because if you think about it happened for other films previous, I can remember The Godfather, famously, there were lines across the block just waiting to go see the movie. So I guess maybe, but from what I understand, just that term blockbuster came in 1943 in two magazines about Bombarder. So yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Certainly not maybe what everyone was expecting. So bit of fun history facts there.
Yeah, it was interesting to see how the progression happened, how they were okay, we need to get butts in the movie theaters, air conditioning, snacks. Now we need a big excuse. So the biggest films we can think of and things like that. I mean, in today's age, all of those reclining seats and now some of the fancier movie theaters, actually you can order a pizza and a burger and it'll come to you nice and warm.
Well, and that's also speaking to the evolution of the whole theater going experience.
Yeah.
And now with all the assigned seating,
Mm.
people have less incentive to line up. I know all of us are old enough to remember
Oh, yeah.
movies that you cared a lot about and you wanted good seats for because they were big screen theater movies. You had to get there really early and wait in line for a long time.
There was this guy that I just saw this on social media. He's like, none of these children and teens know what it's like to be
Mhm.
going to the movie theater in the 2000s and the 90s. And I'm like, really, any time before this time. But I remember my roommates were huge Harry Potter fans
Mm.
of the books and all that. And it was the last film, and I wasn't, but I went with them. Midnight showing. We had to get there at like 10:30. I felt like I was going to be stampeded to death.
Uh-huh.
And we had to get, because it wasn't assigned seating yet for the last film.
Yeah. Sandra, maybe you might know because you did some research and some facts on stuff. We have a sense of when the assigned seating really, I only personally remember the first few times that I saw it in some theaters, and it was maybe like early 20 teens, like
Yeah.
2012 or
I would
something.
say less than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I only started doing that by going to the theater in Bethesda Row, and seeing it maybe about 2018, 2019.
For those of us, because we are based in DC, for those of us who remember, there have been different, DC Metro maps that have come out with silly names for the different stops. And for a couple of years, I lived at the stop that was called Really Nice Movie Theater because it was
Oh.
one of the first to get cushy reclining seats with the assigned seating. Well, that was in Courthouse in Northern Virginia. So that was
Nice.
one of the first that I remember. That's why I'm like, I'm remembering that time, and it was this great phenomenon. And now we all take it for granted because everyone has those types of seats.
Well, I just give a quick shout out. Speaking of cushy seats, the Avalon Theater, which is a nonprofit theater here in Northwest Washington, D.C. I think with season 1, we interviewed the executive director, Bill Orbendorfer, and they are a theater with really cushioned seats. That was a theater built in 1922, and they have redone that. And if you go to the movie theater there, you'll see the art house films such as Asteroid City that's coming up in June. And you'll also see Oppenheimer, another art house film that's going to be opening in July. So speaking of movie theaters, shout out to the Avalon. I recommend that one.
Is Oppenheimer considered an art house one? Isn't that a big film?
It could be a big film, but it could be also because it's not all the action packed. And that gets back to what Tara was saying about blockbusters. I read a story, it was the Hollywood Insider, it was from July 2021, and it talked about the modern blockbuster, how that was invented. And that was because of Independence Day. So, Independence Day, that film with Will Smith, kind of invented the modern blockbuster, to pick up on what Tara was saying. And that was released on July 3rd, 1996. And it was because it's high concept, it has big stars, and lots of action. So if you see a lot of the movies that do come out in the summertime, you'll see they are considered blockbusters because they have, well-known actors, lots of action. Well, one of the things that Tara talked about was Jaws, and I looked up, according to a list from Entertainment Weekly that came out on May 3rd, 2023, if you're looking at high-grossing summer blockbuster movies, they had on the list, it was like the top 100. The number 10 was National Lampoon's Animal House, and that was released on July 28th, 1978. And one of the things about that particular movie, it had the iconic performance with John Belushi in that. It also kind of started the National Lampoon franchise. So what we think of today as franchise, we have the Fast and Furious, we've got your Mission Impossible franchise, the Marvel comic franchise. And that kind of started off the franchise for National Lampoon with that particular feature. Also in that Entertainment Weekly list, number 3 was Jurassic Park, which came out June 11th, 1993. And that apparently worldwide $1.1 billion on that gross for that kind of film. I know. Can you believe that?
Is that the current stat? Like that's what it is now? Or was that like its opening year? Or
apparently,
weekend,
yes,
or?
Because this list is from Entertainment Weekly, May 3rd, 2023. Number 2 is Star Wars, but this is episode 4, A New Hope.
okay.
That was released May 25th, 1997. But again, I mentioned Jaws, the number 1 movie on the Entertainment Weekly list. And that movie from Steven Spielberg came out on June 20th, 75. Now, I do have a question for you, and maybe someone listening will let us know. The crew nicknamed the shark that was used in Jaws Bruce. So I could not find why did the crew, the film's crew, nickname the shark Bruce. So if anybody out there is listening and you know the answer, send us an email to podcast@wif.org and let us know, why did the crew name the shark Bruce?
Well, I do know that it didn't work all the time, and that was why they changed things to be a lot more in your head, which ended up working out best, because what goes on in your mind is
Yeah.
far scarier than what you can see. So its malfunction ended up kind of improving the film. I'm curious now that that's named Bruce, if that's why. I think there's a couple of animated
Well, I was thinking
things.
Finding
In Finding
Nemo.
Nemo, the
There's
shark
the
is Bruce.
shark
Yeah.
Bruce. And I wonder if
Exactly. It might
it's
be an
because
homage
of
to that.
Jaws.
Yeah, I was wondering, I'm like, I know of at least
Yeah.
one big picture Bruce shark in the animated realm. Maybe it was just a dig at someone on set, or honoring somebody, or
Or maybe they're like, it looks like a
maybe it just
Bruce.
looked like a Bruce. Yeah.
Well, the thing
That's
about
cool.
the summer movies is the summertime is not normally for when the Oscar release movies come out or the Golden Globe release comes out, but it's mostly like taking your family, your Saturday night date, you're hanging out with your girlfriends. Although that kind of changed this year when we had Top Gun Maverick came out last summer, and then that particular movie was nominated for an Oscar. So
Yeah,
that
no,
kind of
that's
changed. They
true.
said, oh, an action film that was nominated for an Oscar. But normally it's not the time where they come out. Although,
Yeah, that's true. Because in the summer, as I was even mentioning at the top, that's when people are on break. So that's when kids, they're not in school, and it's easier to see more movies or to go finally see a movie. And so that's why you get like family ones and action ones and ones that are good for a wider variety. As Tara was saying, with the temperatures, reasons to go inside. It's interesting that now there's more credit being given to the big action, big picture thing. As we've all known, people have a lot of great memories tied to these particular movies. They're not crap movies. They're really well done. There's often like really great story, great acting, amazing effects, all this stuff that goes into it. So why not honor them with awards like they do for the more dramatic, or, maybe think pieces, or just character driven stuff? Like they're just as important, and they keep the industry. It's what drives people to go to the movies, which helps keeps things going.
one thing I wanted to point out, though, we had talked about before what constitutes a summer movie and what constitutes a summer movie release. Does it mean it came out in May? Does it mean it came out in July? And I wanted to point out the movie Bridesmaids premiered on April 28th, 2011, and it had its U.S. premiere on May 13th, 2011. That one, came out, and that was a huge hit and ended up getting Melissa McCarthy nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Kristen Wiig, one of the co-writers on that, she and her partner got nominated. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that a movie that comes out in June or July is the summer blockbuster. You can also have some movie come out in April or May.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of if it has staying power through the summer. So, it's not like it came out in November. If it's in the spring or late spring, but it's still drawing big audiences through the summer months. And then another thing is, a lot of times schools can get out in May. I know some college graduations and things like that are in May.
I was going to say in colleges for the most part, because this just remembered me. So a memory from when I went to go see Bridesmaid is when my college roommate and I were done with classes, and we ended up actually living half an hour away. Like our parents lived a half an hour away from each other. So we come home and we decide to meet up to go to the movies, and we go see Bridesmaid. And we liked it, but there was only one other person in the theater with us. So when we kept hearing about this huge hit, and we're like, really? The poop one? The one where they poop in the bride's game?
Spoiler alert, but yeah.
Yeah, but like we saw it like probably like the 12 p.m. showing on a Wednesday because we didn't have any classes anymore and stuff like that. And some of the research I saw, like between May and August, those would be considered the summer blockbusters. But yeah, April to July or so forth.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And because you were even saying like US release of that was in May. I think May to August is pretty accurate. But Speaking of what you had said with seeing it in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, I don't know if anybody else is like this or is able to be. I am grateful for the fact that I have flexible enough hours that when I see if I'm going to go see a theater movie now, I go in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week to avoid people.
That's true.
I know it's nice to do the audience and the collective shared experience. And that is one of the joys of theater going and seeing things in a group, and you hear the oohs and the ahs and the screams together and the laughs. And that is an amazing experience. But post COVID, I'm a little bit more inclined to go when there's less people. And it might take a little more time for me to adjust to back to bigger crowds.
Well, I'm a big talker during movies.
No.
So I do it
Tara.
so that no one else gets annoyed.
Sandra's shaking her fingers at you.
Streaming. We would my best friend and I will just pause the movie and just say our thing. But you can't do that in a movie theater. So now it's just like, I got to tell you now before I forget. And then we go watch.
Okay, well,
continue. So it's this weird thing of streaming when we got used to streaming. And when is it worth going back to the movie theater?
Well, I just know that now I shouldn't see a movie with you in person because I'm one of those, all right, the movie's about to start. Nobody talk. Let's give this piece of art the respect it deserves. Although that said, I will probably still throw a comment here and there, even after I say that.
Well, it's getting back into the etiquette of things, right? Like you're a little nervous since the pandemic started to be in a crowded theater. It's hard for me to remember you can't pause.
Right.
And who cares about your thought? And you're like, oh, that reminds me of a funny story when I went in line at the grocery store and I'm like, that doesn't matter.
That now. Well, speaking of funny theater experiences, I might as well just share a funny one now, and maybe you guys have some funny ones too. I do remember when Bend It Like Beckham came out.
Oh my God.
I watched that film, and in a crowd of people, if anyone's seen it, there is a scene, and it's not always my typical type. Jonathan Rhys-Meyers is his name, the guy who plays the coach.
Yes, it is.
There's a scene where they open a door and he turns around and you see him with a button-down shirt, top button unbuttoned, and the light catches his eyes.
Blue eyes piercing.
And what happened was the theater was quiet because it was a quiet scene getting up to that. The door opens and I had no control and I went, "Shia!" And the whole theater started laughing at me. So I provided some additional entertainment in that showing. So for me, that I will always have a little soft spot for Bend It Like Beckham because of that one scene where I inadvertently made the whole theater laugh.
He's beautiful in that movie, and then there's the part where he's yelling at the field and his eyes again are so bright and blue that he kind of looks like a demon, and you're like, I'm scared, but I still love him.
Do you guys have any particularly fun or standout theater moments?
Well, I wanted to say, I can't remember. It's the Mission Impossible, I think 4, where they break into the Kremlin. That's not a huge spoiler. That's like within the first hour.
The first hour.
We went to go.
You're like, it's spoiler. It's not in the preview, but it's fine.
It's in the no. I think it's in the trailer too. He's like, "You want us to break into the Kremlin?" We loved it so much, we wanted to see it again, but we snuck in a can of Coke. Not a bottle, because you can only get like a huge bottle, and we just wanted a little bit. So you're not supposed to. I know, but we were like, we knew when the big explosions or something loud was going to happen, so that we can open the can so it doesn't make too much noise. And I remember we timed it so well, and we're like, oh my God, it's our own Mission Impossible moment.
That's pretty fun. Yeah.
But I can't really, if Ocean's 11 was a summer one, because again, this is before you could buy your tickets ahead of time and assign seating. But I remember it was so crowded that people were sitting on the stairs. I'm assuming they snuck in
that
to
would be
watch the movie.
Like a fire code violation.
Right. But I mean, it was a huge movie and it's really well done. I just remember we're sitting in comfortable seats and people kept walking in and sitting on the stairs and we laugh and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, those were the things that kind of popped into my head. But I can't remember if it's necessarily a summer, but it gets back to why you go to the movie theater.
No, for sure.
Period.
As Sandra, after yours, I thought of another summer related one too. So go ahead, you share yours first.
I do remember going to see the first Jurassic Park, and it was a Saturday night. I had a date, and I'm holding the guy's hand in the movie theater, and there's this one scene where the guy's name is Wayne. He was the guy who was Newman from Seinfeld. And he's in this car and it's really quiet. And then all of a sudden, one of the baby dinosaurs goes, "Ah!" and attacks him. And I literally jumped out of my seat. I probably put nails into my date's hand.
Oh, no.
And that scene literally made me jump. And I remember that distinctly in watching
Oh,
that
man.
movie.
A jump scare through and through. It did its job. Yeah, most of those jump scares are just based on like sound too. It's just a shock after quiet. No, another thing that I remembered was I used to work at a movie theater. I worked at a movie theater one summer. It was an indie movie theater. Bethesda Row Cinema, shout out. And I remember the summer that My Big Fat Greek Wedding came out because it started in smaller theaters, but it became so popular that it eventually made it to bigger theaters because we would get lines around the block. So I guess a blockbuster of sorts, if that's what that's based on. We would get lines day after day after day. We just couldn't handle it anymore. And so it ended up being in the bigger stuff. But yeah, that was a particularly interesting because it was a hot summer too. And we had to do line management. It was a quiet theater otherwise. And it was just one that the crowds almost broke me.
Oh, and that guy in that movie as well is really cute. He played Aiden in Sex and the City. I can't think of his name
John
right
Corbett.
now. John Corbin. Yeah, no, another cutie pie.
Another perfect man on screen. And My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 is coming out at the end in September.
Oh, wow.
So not quite summer.
Well, when it comes to summer movies, I think it really depends. What type of movie? Do you go for the big budget and the action ones and the fancy stunt work? Or do you like the small scale, movies that are script driven? I think that's the choice, and that's what you have to decide when it comes to what you want to see this summer, because I think there's a wide range of choices that are coming out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that brings us right to, we could talk about some of those ones that are coming up this year. If you're listening in the archives years into the future, we're talking about 2023. 2023 summer movie lineup.
Yeah.
So we pulled together some of them starting from, as we were talking about, May, and got a list of a bunch of the ones that are like, getting buzz and things that are going to be big ones this summer. So yeah, do you guys have any particular ones that you're excited about?
I picked 3 from what really caught my eye, but I'm sure you guys will mention things that I'd be like, oh, I might. Again, it's sort of getting in, like going and not being able to pause to go to the bathroom or to say something. And my mom pointed this out. She's like, these seats are so comfortable. You're just going to fall asleep through everything because of the reclining and all sorts of stuff. But I do want to be spoiled. And so I like the idea of getting like a whole meal with dessert.
You like movie, like theaters, cinema theaters, like the
Yeah, the whole thing. So I actually picked 3 that I am pretty much willing to go to the movie theater for.
What are they?
In order of release, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, releasing on June 2nd.
Stoked for that one as well. Yeah.
The first one I never got to see in theater, but I watched it 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, it's so good.
And the animation is quite new, but it's such a well done movie. Jake Johnson has some of the best lines, and it takes a while to get used to the animation. So I'd be intrigued to see it on the big screen, and B, they did such a good job with the first one. I am a little nervous with the sequel, but I have faith in it. And then July 7th, Insidious, The Red Door.
That one's all you, Tara.
It's a horror film. Actually, Boogeyman comes out June 2nd too. And that's more of like an indie film. But do I really want to go to the movie theater for it? I'm not sure. I might not. But Insidious, The Red Door is, I think, the 5th and allegedly the final installment to the Insidious franchise. And what I really like about it is it's the whole family. The very first Insidious came out, I think, 10 years ago, about a little boy who goes in a coma, and we find out it's not really a coma, and his dad went through the same thing, and his dad has to help him get out of the coma. Anyway, it's 10 years later. That little boy is now going to college. How has the family coped? And it's the same exact actors.
Oh, that's nice.
So those
that's
children,
nice when they can do that.
Yeah, and I thought that was cool. And it's Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne play the parents, and then Patrick Wilson's first film directorial debut, basically. So I'm intrigued by that, but also that they kept up with everyone. They have a little baby daughter in the first one, and now she's 10, right? So I was like, oh, that is so
I
cool.
love when they're able to do that, because that's pretty rare to have the same actors
Yeah.
for that amount of time or for spanning that time.
And then Barbie, July 21st.
I'm curious about that one as well.
And I want that with a big crowd. I think that would be fun.
But I was going to say Barbie is kind of a one to me that is also similar to like The Little Mermaid, where I'm curious about it and I really hope it doesn't suck. You know, I really want it to be good. I know that Barbie's going to be something that's not what people are expecting, and I hope it's done in a good way. And then the previews that I've seen of The Little Mermaid just don't make it look that good. And I really, really want it to be good. I like the concept, but the live action remakes of these animated ones just don't do as well as the original.
Yeah.
I think it's great, you know, who they cast and everything. It's just some of the animated characters just look
they don't
terrible.
translate
Yeah, they really
well.
don't translate.
And each time they do a live action, it's proving that it's some things are meant to be cartoonish and not live action.
Speaking of action, some of the ones that I'm excited for, but I've already seen, is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 that came out May 5th. That I thought was a really nice little summation of that trilogy. I really enjoyed it. So that one I was excited to see. And that to me qualified as a theater movie. So sometimes it's like the visuals really warrant the big screen. So I'll do it that way. Otherwise, I'll probably just watch it at home. I am looking forward to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Another one I hope is good. I don't know if I have much faith that it's going to be amazing, but I really, really want it to be great because I like Indiana Jones. I'm obsessed with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That's my favorite of the whole franchise. I'm really looking forward to that. I will say Fast X, which came out May 19th. I've seen a couple of the Fast and Furious, right? It's not necessarily my thing. I don't fault it. I'm just not excited about them. But Fast X looks like a really fun finish for those. I saw the preview and I was like, if only I was into those, that seems like it would be a really good one.
Well, it's part 1 of part 2
Oh,
for
is
the
it?
finale.
Oh my gosh, they just never end. But the Fast and the Furious movies are going to be going on forever, apparently.
And apparently, I haven't watched this. My favorite thing is to hear people who love the films talk about it. But in the last one, the 9th one, they drive to space.
Yeah, no, they're absurd. They're
about?
like
Anyway.
they're becoming like Sharknado or something. It's just the suspension of disbelief. And I professionally work with cars in some of my other life. And so it's those movies, it's always crazy to see some of what they do and what they expect you to believe. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's not how that works. But I will suspend all the disbelief and enjoy the crazy, crazy action ride. But yeah, I'm also very excited about the Spider-Man one too.
I'm excited about the Barbie movie, which you mentioned. That's directed by Greta Gerwig, and it's going to be released July 21st, 2023, and it's Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. Although I have to say, in watching the previews, Ryan Gosling, who I think is so hot and so cute, looks weird.
Yeah.
But he has great comic talent.
Yeah, but I think we talked about this maybe in something else. I think if you're going visually, you know, Barbie cast perfectly, 100% cast perfectly. She's great. She looks just like Barbie. Ryan Gosling, again, great actor, great body, everything. And I think he's a handsome man. He just doesn't look like Ken.
With the beach blonde.
He's like facially does not look enough like Ken for me to go along on that. But, you know, I'm still going to give it a chance. Why not?
Right?
I think they also thought he does have a good comedy. It's the same. I think him and Chris Pine have very good comic timing, which is why Dungeons and Dragons was quite successful. And everyone can agree that Chris Pine really was the driving force.
Would we call that one a summer movie as well? Because when did that come out? It came out recently.
That came out in April. Early April, or maybe late March. But thinking of the casting of it, I mean, also Ryan Gosling could have looked more like Ken if you think about it. But I'm wondering how they like really gave him a weird tan and the hair color and the neon colors that he has to wear. But he is so funny. I keep quoting him from just the 2 seconds he's on camera. He's like, I honestly don't know. But I think that's also nostalgia.
I've had some Barbies and played with them a little bit, but I don't, there's no nostalgia bringing me to that movie. It's just sheer curiosity.
I do want to also see Past Lives, and that's coming out June 2nd, and it's starring Greta Lee. She was also in Russian Doll, and it centers on a love triangle of a childhood friend from Korea, and the woman, Greta Lee, is now living in New York, and she has a long-term partner, and her childhood friend from South Korea comes to New York to see her and what happens. I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Another movie that I'm looking forward to seeing is called Joyride. That's coming out on July 7th. It's from Lionsgate. First-time director, Adele Lim, and she co-wrote Crazy Rich Asians. So it's kind of a raunchy comedy. Four friends are traveling through the
cool.
Far East, and everything that could go wrong goes wrong. So, and finally, I just want to put a shout out to, you'll be surprised about this choice, Mission Impossible. That's coming out July 12th with one and only Tom Cruise.
Yeah, so are you going to see that in the theater?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, Sandra. So for me, Private Lives, I was like, I could just wait until that's streamed. What made you want to see it in theaters?
Oh, Past Lives? I just like going back to the theater. I think I really got into it when we were researching the Oscar thing and going back into the theater and that experience of being with other people as opposed to watching it on the small screen. So I want to see it that way again. I miss doing that.
I can see that. I'm just still, I guess, a little too much of a curmudgeon that wants to watch things alone. One that I am looking forward to, but to me doesn't feel like it needs a big theater is You Hurt My Feelings.
Right, and that's coming out. Like, I think it's out already in the theaters.
Yeah, it just came out May 26th. So I want to check that out, but I don't think it needs to be a theater one. And then there are films that aren't necessarily big action screen, but they still are now trying to drive people back to the theaters. So they're releasing it only in theaters at first before they bring it to streaming and other options. So people seem to be back. People are in theaters a lot. They still are selling out. You're still having big opening weekends again, which is nice. And it is a really important part of the film industry to have the theater side of things.
The whole discussion of how modern theaters are, at least in the United States. I was in Cape Town, South Africa in April, and I actually wanted to go see like Dungeons and Dragons and Air, films that I knew would be streamable pretty soon. But to be in the theater, also it'll be cheaper because of the dollar. And I wanted to be spoiled. I wanted to like have the reclining chair and like the good food and all that. And of course, popcorn. So I get to the theater in Cape Town and they're like, I'm like, do you have any sandwiches or anything like that? He's like, what? No, we have popcorn and candy. That's it. And I'm like,
That's classic though.
And then I get to the seat. So I got, I got it. And I got to the seat and it didn't recline. It was comfortable, but it was back in the I was like, what is this, 2010?
Oh, you're so spoiled with the reclining cushy seats now.
And I was talking to my friends who, like, one is from England and some are South African and something. They're like, I think it's really just an American thing, or like weird as if you're in your living room, but
like
you're
a
not,
private theater
with the reclining and all sorts of stuff. So that's one of the reasons I was so excited to come back to the States. And I'm like, what movie would I want to go pay $15 and spend like $45 on all this meals?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is movies are getting longer and longer, it seems like. And, you want something to be cushy if you're going to be sitting for 2.5, 3 hours, previews and all that stuff too. I mean, you're sometimes in the theater for over 3 hours. And it's not a play with an intermission. So I'm curious, what the tipping point is going to be for the lengths of movies before they bring back the intermission? Then they can bring back the let's all go to the movies, that little intermission kind of dance with the snacks.
Yeah, I think the last time I heard that in a movie theater was for Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet, which was like in 98 or something like that, because it was 4.5 hours long and they actually had an intermission.
Mm-hmm.
And then with all the Marvel films, there was I guess, challenge, but to see all of the Marvel films before Endgame, Avengers Endgame, in one sitting. So it was about 19 and a half hours in the theater.
In one
and
sitting.
A couple of podcasters and bloggers did it. And they're like, we needed a massage after it.
I did that, but at home over like a few weeks.
Right. But there was like no real intermission. It was like during the credits, but you knew there was after credits scenes and like they were rushing to go to the bathroom and stuff.
I do say, and I think I've said this previously, I will credit, I think the MCU and those movies really, with the stingers and the post-credit scenes, I think I like that it's getting people to stay in the theater and appreciate how many people put a film together. You know, people would just so often, I remember that growing up, you go see movies in the theater, and as soon as the credits start to roll, people leave. And I like that now people are being kind of forced to see who put this together. I mean, it's a big undertaking that takes a really long time, often, you know, like years or months, or, you know, certainly at least months. So yeah, I think that's great. But we are running a bit long on time, so I think we can wrap it up now. But it looks like there are a lot of great things that people can look forward to. We either mentioned some that you're also excited for, or definitely not excited for. There's a bunch that we didn't mention, but obviously, if you're looking forward to it, you already know when it is, and you're probably figuring out when you're going to get your tickets for it. So yeah, I mean, basically, enjoy, happy summer, and hopefully everyone listening enjoys in the theater at least a couple of movies this summer. Do you guys have any final parting words for our listeners?
Yeah, get spoiled at the movie theater. It's worth it.
Get your popcorn ready.
Yeah, take advantage of those cushy modern theaters, but be classic with popcorn. I like that. Awesome. Well, happy summer, everyone.
Happy summer.
Happy summer.
Thank you for listening to Media and Monuments, a service of Women in Film and Video in Washington, D.C. Please remember to review, rate, and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. For more information about WIF, please visit our website at WIF as in Frank, V as in Victor.org.